Smartwatches first came to people's attention with a Kickstarter campaign back in 2012 from a little known startup called Pebble, releasing what they deemed as the next big thing in technology. It was a simple device with an e-ink screen that connected to your phone to keep you up to date. Now in 2014, some of the biggest names in smartphone tech are on board, LG, Samsung and soon Motorola, to release their vision for what the smartwatch can and will be for the foreseeable future. All with the help of Google's new OS, Android Wear. But what most people don't know is that the idea of a smartwatch actually first appeared over 2 decades ago. So what's happened between then and now? This is the history of the smartwatch. So the concept of a smartwatch is nothing really new, despite the fact that they've really come to the forefront of people's minds in the past 2 years. The old idea of packing everything into a watch on your wrist originated back in the 80s, and that eventually led them to becoming an extension of the phone in your pocket today. Back in 1999, Samsung's SPH-WP10 mixed the idea of a watch and a smartphone in one. Obviously being way before its time, it only lasted for 90 minutes of talk time and it also costed close to $700. Needless to say, it didn't sell very well. In the year 2000, IBM in collaboration with Citizen Watch Company created the WatchPad, the first of the actually usable smartwatches that ran Linux 2.4, had 8MB of RAM, Bluetooth, a vibrating mechanism, accelerometer and a fingerprint sensor, all with up to 12 hours of battery. Originally intended for students and business people, the watch was set to cost $399 but was later discontinued around the year 2002. I presume because of the lack of the market for the product at the time, especially at that price. The WatchPad was followed soon after by a range of rather more attractive looking watches by Fossil that attempted to pack the then popular PDA into something the size of a watch, which actually worked pretty well. Now after 2002, for about 4 or 5 years, the whole smartwatch category was left rather quiet while companies presumably waited for technology to improve, while they worked on other products such as this attractive looking beast. Ew. In 2005, Microsoft finally got the ball rolling again with their SPOT, or Smart Personal Objects Technology Initiative, a project intended to personalize household electronics and many other appliances around your home, including the smartwatch. The whole idea was that SPOT would provide more information at a glance without all the interaction that other platforms required. Now unsurprisingly, the watches were not a huge success. Despite the fact that they were bulky and needed constant charging, the small screens meant you couldn't really see much at all at a glance, and then having to subscribe to services on an ongoing basis meant the whole thing was just not very appealing, so as you can imagine, Microsoft shut down the project in 2008. So that brings us to 2009 when Samsung really shook things up with their second attempt at a watch phone 10 years later, the S9110. At the time it was touted as the world's thinnest watch phone with a 1.76-inch touchscreen, Bluetooth, email support and MP3 playback. The 12mm thick device also supported the first voice recognition in a smartwatch and had a 40MB internal memory. I have to say, I think I actually remember this one. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the buzz around the 2010 iPod Nano being used as a smartwatch, despite the fact that all it could do was show the time and play music like an iPod should. Obviously it wasn't designed to be a smartwatch, but what's important here is that Apple actually brought up the idea of wearing it on your wrist as a watch, so that just showed interest from the company at the time in the whole area of smartwatches, but we're still waiting on the iWatch. Now 2012 is when things really start to heat up, with Sony releasing their smartwatch and companion to the Xperia range of smartphones, which didn't really catch on but did show what could be done in the area. And of course the famous Pebble e-ink watch, funded by a Kickstarter campaign that's really been credited to have started it all in recent years. Having reached their $100,000 goal in less than 2 hours, it was clear Pebble were onto something. Closing the campaign with over $10 million in the bank, we've since seen a second generation Pebble Steel with a sturdier, better built metal body and buttons with Gorilla Glass and either a leather or metal strap. For me, I actually really liked the Pebble Watch, but what put me off it at the time was the fact that it had an e-ink display which was of course black and white and had a very low resolution, so that was really the breaking point for me, so I really held off until something else better came down the line, and sure enough, this year I wasn't disappointed. Earlier this year, Google announced their custom-built OS for the smartwatch called Android Wear, which was met with great excitement from the industry. Compatible with Android 4.3 and up, the OS integrates Google Now and mobile functions into a smartwatch form factor. At Google I/O last week, we saw even more of the upcoming OS and a release of the LG G Watch and Samsung Galaxy Gear Live, an increment to Samsung's previous Galaxy Gear range from last year. Motorola are now set to release their Moto 360, the only round smartwatch so far running Android Wear, later this summer. And that brings us to today. Android Wear is all the rage right now, and with the LG G Watch and Samsung Galaxy Gear Live coming out next week, the smartwatch sector is really spreading out to the masses, but the Moto 360 coming out later in the summer is probably the most anticipated and probably the best smartwatch we've seen so far. No matter what device you decide to run Android Wear on, the interface is basically the same. A grid of cards you can swipe through to browse notifications from your phone, act on them by speaking to Google Now, or dismiss them with a swipe. The focus here is on simplicity and automation. Google intend for users to trust them with their data and know that Google will do the right thing at the right time. Personally, I think the idea of having your watch as a companion to your phone is the right way to go, rather than having it as a completely separate entity. Putting too much functionality into a watch is just as bad as putting in too little. Android Wear is the nearest thing I've seen so far to what a smartwatch should be. Everyone's excited to see how this develops, and with Apple to finally announce their iWatch before the end of the year, and with others to come, I think 2014 is definitely the year of the smartwatch. So that was a quick history of how far the smartwatch has come and how bright the future seems for the category. Let me guys know if you intend on getting a smartwatch and which ones you're most excited for. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure and subscribe if you enjoyed. I might do some more history lessons in the future if you guys like them. A new video coming next weekend, and I'll see you guys then. Bluetooth, a vibrating mechanism into a watch on your wrist. Oh, for